Before someone points out, yes, I know this is not an original patch that I should be wearing on the sleeve, but I have not yet gotten to obtaining the original patches for the Chinese uniforms. Don't worry, I'll do that a bit later. Всем привет, or let's rephrase it, Ni hao. Welcome back, everyone. I am Kazak, and as you can see, we are in a totally different scenery. I am not in a forest, I'm not outside, I'm not even in the country. I am sitting in my hotel room in Beijing, China, because I wanted to talk about China. As you can see, I'm wearing Chinese military uniform. I wanted to talk about China today. Not specifically about military equipment, but about the country and the people and the life in the country. So my first reaction, my first thought that I had when coming to China, when I saw everything, was this is a different world. I am entering a different world. And this phrase, different world, I believe has stayed with me for this trip, for China, and I'll probably incorporate it in either the thumbnail or the title of this video in some way. And that's truly because of the propaganda that we're being fed about China and about socialism, about communism, right? We're taught to hate communism, to hate socialism, that it's bad, it's a dictatorship, and that we need to have democracy like the US. But I would like to disagree with it. Yeah, we can see that the US and similarly Europe, countries of Europe, will change political parties between elections, but you can see that the policies, many policies rather, don't change but stay how they are. Meanwhile, in China, it's kind of the opposite. The ruling party doesn't really change because it's still the Communist Party of China. It will be the Communist Party of China. But the policies change to suit what the people need, what the people want. And I think this is the biggest difference between our quote-unquote civilized West and the socialist China. Comparing China to Europe, where I am from, where I currently live, I think that China is more advanced, and it's not even a matter of whether I think or not. It's just a fact that China is a lot more modernized, a lot more advanced than EU, and so the USA, of course. And it's rather a matter to think that with capitalism we have what we have in Europe, we have what the US has, and then we take a look at China. And I will not disagree that this is far from a perfect socialism, that this is not the communism that we are that we should be trying to create. This is a different system. This is not the perfect socialism. Yet it's still much better than the capitalism we have in Europe or in the US, since it's mostly similar, with some exceptions, right? This is better. We've seen the advances when even on the streets there's so many electric cars, right? There's a lot of cars, pretty much. Even if we go to like the hutongs, which is a term meaning a very narrow street filled with people's houses, it reminds me very much of the more rural, more village, more countryside of what we have at home. But the difference is that there is modern, beautiful, new modern cars at pretty much every house, which is something that you would not see in the village and the countryside that I'm talking about, where I kind of am from. So this shows us the very large difference, and of course another one being even the payments, that rarely someone here is paying with cash. People just use Alipay or WeChat Pay, which I guess in Europe and in the US you can pay with a card, but this is a bit of I would say this is a different level than the standard payments with card, since it's a more or less unified system that you can use for payments, whether that be for paying at whatever a restaurant and at the store, or sending money to your friend, or receiving the money from your friend, or even when you have beggars, which is not a common sight, right? It's a very rare sight, but you would have like someone who is on the street trying to get some money from strangers. You can actually pay him with Alipay or WeChat. It's very much funny to think about it when comparing to the beggars in Europe, right? It will be rather funny to see someone just standing there with a card terminal. But this is pretty much the reality in China. When speaking of payments, right, I wanted to talk about prices. The prices in China, specifically in Beijing, are for food, right? For more or less for food, because they don't really have a reason to check like prices for housing or cars and stuff like that, or pretty much electronics. So just focusing on groceries and food, I think the prices are better here than they are at home. And Beijing is very much an expensive city. There are cities in China with better prices than Beijing, and I still think this is better than my rural areas that I come from, where the prices are very much going up. Inflation, you know how it is. Here it's surprisingly better. Sometimes it's not much better, but usually it is better. Some, of course, things are not better. Or coffee, I guess, is an example of something that is expensive, but it's still cheap here. Of course, the exceptions for that being very much touristy areas, like Beihai Park or the Beijing Zoo, which I have noted have very much overpriced items, overpriced goods. But going to restaurants and buying food, I think the prices will not be higher, will not be much higher than they would be at home. More definitely often the prices are lower, sometimes even much lower than at home, especially when ordering food, right? I've noticed that you can get like a large milk tea, pretty nice sized ice cream with the shipping cost, and pay like €2.50 for it, pretty much €2.50, which is surprising considering at home this is close to this is like you might say a bit close to the price where you would buy just a drink for this price in some places. So it's definitely much better. Getting back maybe to the topic of another world, different world. When walking around in one of the streets, I had a thought. It's like, it was more or less, this country is a fever dream, kind of a fever dream, in comparison with what we are taught and what we know from Europe, from the US, we're taught that socialism is bad, socialism is dictatorship, that communism leads to dictatorship, communism is a form of dictatorship, that people under communist governments or regimes, whatever you want to call it, are not going to be happy, they are not supporting this government, but they are forced to live under this government, under this authoritarian, totalitarian government. And this country, in this regard, is a fever dream, because you can often buy souvenirs that are related to communism, to socialism, to the Communist Party of China, Chairman Mao Zedong, and so on. The example being this flag these two flags that I got in a souvenir store, with the flag of the People's Republic of China and the flag of the Communist Party of China. This is what I'm talking about. When in Europe we are taught that socialism is bad, that Mao Zedong was a bad person, right? Here it's the total opposite of that. You can see that people support socialism, people support the idea of communism, people like, still to this day, people like Mao Zedong, and hit with a reality from the propaganda that we're taught into what the actual reality on the ground is in China, in a socialist country. Whether this socialism is perfect or flawed doesn't matter, it's still a socialist country. And you can see that with advanced, modern, capitalist countries, it falls behind this flawed socialist country, if you want to call it flawed socialism. You can call it whatever you want. I can call it whatever I want. It doesn't matter. What I will call it is socialism with Chinese characteristics, because this is what I heard it being called. You can call it whatever you want. It still does not matter, because the point still remains the same, that this system beats out the capitalist systems. Another thing there is to say is that the propaganda often says that communists don't like to respect tradition, which this is another case of hitting a wall of reality and meeting the actual reality. In China, if you believe that kind of propaganda, there are many buildings and museums even related to those buildings that come from different times of Chinese history. Specifically, I'm talking about the time when it was being emperors, monarchies. A great example of that being the Forbidden City, which I visited on my second day in China, or many of the standing Buddhist temples in the city, like in Shichahai or Beihai Park. And while speaking on the topic of temples and faith, religion, another point which is often said by the propagandalists is that the Chinese government or the Communist Party or the idea of communism will block access to religion and faith, or fight religion, which is again proven to be false. When visiting China, I have attended church in Beijing, and there was actually a lot of people in there. It's not that. So you cannot say that the government just makes it illegal for these people to be Christians, when I've seen the church, I went inside, I saw the whole process, there was a lot of people in there. Many people took the Holy Communion, some people took the blessing instead. The whole process was in Chinese, and what I find to be again more, I guess, forward right than the Europe and the church in Europe would be the example that there are actual women that are doing I guess, work in church. I'm not sure how to properly call this in English, right? But I did attend church in China, proving that Christianity is not banned in China. The religion is not banned in China. So I know what kind of comment I will be getting under this video. What about Tiananmen Square? I went there. What can I say? This again proves the point of people supporting socialism, people liking Mao Zedong. There was such a crowd on that square that it took us extremely long to even get there. Right, standing in a very long queue. It just didn't seem that the queue was even moving. And when we got there, there was a lot of people there. Everyone wanted to go inside, see the buildings from a closer area, to take a picture with the portrait of Mao. There was so many people taking photos with the portrait of Mao. It's again, it proves my point of this country being like a fever dream when compared to the Western propaganda. And when it comes to the actual events surrounding the Tiananmen Square, I advise you to go check out Hakim's video on this topic. I don't want to get into this because this is not a video on this specific topic. I'm just shortly mentioning it here, so it's not, so you cannot say that I didn't mention this at all. But regarding Tiananmen, there are checks when you get into the square. They check your belongings, and this, of course, you can understand why, because this is a very much important, very much a politically important, very much a sensitive place. Also remembering that the government officials of the People's Republic live in the area, live nearby. So obviously they would rather be safe when trying to and seeing who enters the Tiananmen. Right? I am not criticizing the fact that they are checking your belongings. Another thing, and while we're talking about checking the belongings, there are police checkpoints in the city. There is a lot of police in the city. There are, of course, police in the subway, at the entrances of the subway, running the so-called security checks, which is where they scan your bags, scan what items you're bringing with you. And there is a lot of cameras in the subway, for example. Some people might say that this is the example of the control, that the people are being watched, checked on every corner, you know. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. And I highly disagree with that mentality. If you do not have anything to hide, anything bad to hide, right, then you shouldn't have a problem with the fact that they are going to, X-ray check your bag, or the fact that you need to show them that you have a water bottle and they need to check that it's actually water. If you're not trying to do anything bad at the subway, then you shouldn't have a problem with them having a camera situated in the subway, right? This is my point with it. And the police, we're not gonna stop you for just existing, for going to the store. Nobody cares about that. You can go to the store, you can go walk around the streets like I did a few times. You're not gonna be stopped out of the blue. We're there to make sure crime doesn't happen. And even so, I'm sure that some people will just still, even when I say it, will still believe that, we shouldn't have they shouldn't check your bags when going to the subway, or they shouldn't have the police in the subway or on the streets so often because blah blah blah, because blah 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 blah. But this way people can actually feel safe because we know that nothing bad is going to happen, and the people here truly like the fact that they are in China, like their country, like their government. The people here like the socialism. I've very often seen people that have put a flag, a Chinese flag, or the flag of the Communist Party of China in their car, or have stickers with the Chinese flag on their clothes, on a cap, hat, or on a t-shirt, on a jacket, and so on. Believe me, it's a very common sight in Beijing, and Mao is also a common sight. As much as weird as it may sound, you can buy souvenirs related to Mao with the image of Chairman Mao, whether that be t-shirts, small bags, backpacks, plates, decorative plates, right? Magnets, pretty much whatever you can imagine, you can get with the image of Chairman Mao Zedong. Another thing, the people here are extremely friendly. You're not going to be stared at because evil capitalist Westerner has come to China. Yeah, you will get some looks from time to time, because that happens when you're in a minority, just like a black person would in Eastern Europe or something like that, right? This is not something to be surprised about, but I do want to say that it doesn't really happen that often. Most of the time people don't care, tourist or not, foreigner or not, they don't really care that much, I would say. One more thing I wanted to touch up on before I end this video: the Chinese internet, so-called known as the Chinese firewall and VPNs. Yes, in China, websites like Google or Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit are not available. Google Play Store is not available. Why is that? It's not because the Chinese government decided to block these websites for no reason, or whatever the reason being is that something blah blah blah, freedom of speech, blah blah blah. When you have freedom of speech, you criticize the Chinese government, blah blah blah, whatever, or because they were spreading the truth about evil CCP and how evil they're treating the Chinese people. No, actually it's because these apps didn't want to follow the laws and regulations of the government, and that's not to be surprised, because these are in fact very much Western owned websites and services. Do I think that this is a bad thing, that these websites are not available in China? Absolutely, I do not think it's a bad thing. I think it's actually a good thing. And let me articulate why. Being in the West, Europe or the US, you get pretty much an unrestricted access to these websites right when you get a phone into your hands or sit on the computer. You get unfiltered access to adult websites, to the gore and vile content that is available on websites like Reddit and Twitter. You get access to, of course, Google, and unfiltered access to many adult video services, websites, right? And as we know, this can easily lead the child that is exposed to that to later develop an addiction, and it is very much a problem of the modern world. That is why I think actually restricting the internet a bit is a good thing. This way, that you know that the child is not. You can give your child the access to internet, and you know they will not have just straight up unfiltered access to adult content or other vile or gore stuff that you would not want them to see. And if you do already grow up and you decide, well, let's check out the Western internet, I guess you might call it that, at the point where you can get a VPN and can get it working, you should already be aged enough where it will not have such an effect, such a negative effect on you as it would on a young child. And this is an example where I believe that maybe in some way restricting something actually, you might say, that leads to better results. You might say that it leads to more freedom, simply because you then don't run into the problems that many people in the West would run into. Specifically, I'm talking about the very much prevalent addiction of young people to adult videos. Okay, so I am recording this part after already returning, and I just wanted to go over some stuff regarding the software in China. Specifically, I've had a chance to mess around, to look around through a phone running Harmony OS, which is an operating system used exclusively by Huawei devices. It's used in China. Huawei smartphones sold in China ship with Harmony OS, and the market share is about 19% compared to Android, which is about 70%. The Harmony OS, personally, as much as I had a chance to use it, wasn't a lot of time to play around with it. It's pretty much okay, it's usable. It allows you to sideload apps, which basically means it makes it a good and usable operating system, unlike iOS. Here, Huawei has stated it does not plan to use Harmony OS on phones sold outside China. These use Android via EMUI. So I guess it's only limited to China. Right. But since we know Google isn't available in China, we have I decided to get from ChatGPT answers regarding whether the Android is the same in China as it is abroad, so I can go over this. So yeah, let's look at the key differences within the operating system. The base system is the same, because at its core, Android is an open source project, as it is AOSP, the Android open source project. It's open source, but what is not open source is the bloatware that Google puts onto the base operating system and then ships it to customers, or I guess phone manufacturers ship it to pre-installed to customers. So it's the same base operating system, but the differences start here with the GMS, Google Mobile Services, which come pre-installed on international devices, but are not included in China. That's because Google does not operate in China. So, for example, you will not have access to the Google Play Store. Here, manufacturers usually just have their own app store, for example, Xiaomi or Oppo. Of course, pre-installed apps. So this will include the Google suite of apps, some local bloatware. But in China, you get Chinese apps, whether it be WeChat, Baidu, Alipay, so Of course, differences will be pretty much with everything regarding that somehow connects to Google. Despite the differences above, both international Chinese Android phones are built on AOSP, which is free and open source, and customizations and services on top are what make them different. And this is exactly what I wanted to talk about. While the operating system is the same, the added bloatware, the added apps are going to be different. I then decided to ask ChatGPT to specifically go over Samsung devices, because I use a Samsung phone, and I think it's not even think, this is pretty much the best. This is just the best choice of phone. If you want to have a good phone, just get a Samsung phone. So we have some key differences within the Android print that comes on Galaxy devices. Of course, it's the Android AOSP is going to be the same, because it's just the base operating system. The user interface, which is the One UI, is going to be it's the same version but slightly customized, probably relating to having pre-installed some Chinese apps. I have not gotten a chance to play around with this yet. But yeah, this still comes with standard One UI 6 or One UI 7. But here's where the differences actually start. Google mobile services are included in the international devices, but are not included in China. So what does that mean? The App Store. I think Samsung phones will usually come with both the Galaxy Store and the Google Play Store pre-installed, while in China it will be only the Galaxy Store. This is a point where you might realize something, if you haven't realized it yet. If you use a Samsung phone, your phone pretty much comes with double the bloatware, double the apps, because you get both the Google apps and the Samsung apps. That includes the App Store, that includes a lot of other apps, even a browser, which the Chinese version, not coming with the Google suite of apps, might actually be beneficial, since it's less bloatware, and this is the kind of bloatware that you cannot even uninstall, even if you want it. So this is a very big differences. Of course, pre-installed apps, exactly what I was talking about. Samsung devices come with both Samsung bloatware and Google bloatware, while in China you get the Samsung bloatware and you get, I guess, useful Chinese apps like WeChat, Baidu, or Alipay. Of course, there's these differences. It continues this way. I'm sorry, it's almost 2 AM. With the voice assistant, for example, you get both Bixby and Google Assistant on international devices, but in China you only get Bixby, as Google Assistant is not available. Same with Google Search and Google Maps being replaced with Baidu Search and some kind of local maps, for example, AMAP. And then continuing with the cloud services, we get both Samsung and Google, while here you will get only Samsung and maybe local services. So why is the Chinese version so different? Due to the laws and regulations which Google did not want to abide, Google had to back out from the Chinese market, and Samsung devices sold in China cannot have the Google apps and services, whether it be Play Store, Gmail, or Assistant, so on. So instead, Samsung devices are customized
with local services, whether that be like WeChat, Alipay, AMAP, Baidu. This is basically so that the end user actually already receives a usable device. And despite that, the underlying Android OS and One UI features remain mostly the same, because the only difference is with pre-installed apps and the basically final touches, you might say, of the preparing the operating system for an end user to receive. Just differences with software. So now let's go over what Google Mobile Services, GMS, actually is used for. It's a collection of Google developed apps and APIs, right? It provides very much core functionality for Android, for devices running Android, but that only is outside of China, which is geographically is the majority of the world, but there is a lot of people in China, so China itself is a huge market. So now we have specific categories of what GMS actually does regarding the app ecosystem. Enables apps and app downloads and updates, with the example here being Google Play Store and Play Protect. You do not actually need to download apps only from the Google Play Store. There are alternatives. You can sideload apps, which means to download a .apk file and run it on your device, which, yes, it can be dangerous to do that, but in theory some malicious apps could get through Google's security protection checks on the Play Store as well. Just don't install something that is suspicious, and you should be good. You can even download third-party app stores to use instead of the Google Play Store. Authentication. Google account login, which gives us the access to sign in with Google. Cloud and syncs contacts, calendar, photos, etc. It gives us Gmail, Google Calendar, Google Photos, so on. What else do we have? Accuracy GPS, we have Google Maps, Google Location API, have push notifications, real-time messaging and updates, with the example being FCM. Integrated search voice commands with Google Search, the Google Voice Assistant, and additional stuff like Google Pay and AdMob in-app purchases. So what's included in the GMS? Of course, the Google Play Store, which is probably the main source of apps that people use. Google Play Services, background framework that supports other Google APIs and core Google apps, which you might say called this bloatware. Even though there is YouTube, which I'm recording this video for YouTube, I kind of call all this bloatware if you don't actually need to use it. Where GMS isn't used, it of course isn't used in China, because Google backed out from the mass market due to not wanting to follow the government regulations. It's not used on Huawei devices since 2019 because of US sanctions, and it's not used by some custom ROMs. What does this actually mean? Custom-made operating systems which can be flashed onto your device. Why is that a thing? Because some people like to use Android but don't want to have their Android within the Google ecosystem. So what they would use is what would be called a de-Googled Android. And at that point, it doesn't include GMS, because that's the whole point of the operating system's idea, to not have Google inside of it. It can be sideloaded, but I'm pretty sure most people who would run such an operating system would not want to sideload it. So now let's go over some alternatives to the GMS for those cases where it's not available, like in mainland China or on Huawei devices affected by US sanctions. For Google Play Store, like I said, you can just sideload apps, or you can just get a third-party app store. Examples here being the Huawei App Gallery, Xiaomi Get Apps, Samsung Galaxy Store, Tencent My App, APK Pure, Aurora Store, which I want to focus on. Well, Aurora Store is actually a kind of useful tool. It's an open source client for the Play Store, allowing you to... it relies on sessions. You don't need a Google account. Via Aurora Store, you can download apps basically from the Google Play Store without needing a Google account. It's useful for, as mentioned here, those custom-made operating systems that do not come with GMS and cannot just use the Google Play Store to get apps. The Aurora Store is then an alternative and an option for them if they want to get apps from the Google Play Store. For authentication, the component of the GMS will be Google account login, with alternatives being Huawei ID, Xiaomi account, Apple ID for iOS. I'm not sure why this specifically is mentioned. Well, I thought the result should be only for Android, or custom OAuth services, Facebook, Twitter, email login. Personally, I really don't like this. I don't like to use it. I don't use it unless I need an account for something in a hurry. I think it's maybe more secure if you want to go this way, but I think it's better to have a separate account with a separate password on another website, another service, rather than having it linked to your Google account. But even when it's not available, this is not going to be a problem in China, because you can just log in with WeChat or with Alipay. I have done that and it works, yes. So losing this is not at all a problem. Maps and location services. So instead of Google Maps, there are alternatives, are Baidu Maps, AMAP, which I have used, and it's a very good app. It's also available in English, though it loses some functionality in English. It's still very much usable. Other options will be Here Maps, OpenStreetMap, Mapbox, Petal Maps from Huawei. There is nothing to go more about this. Cloud and synchronization. Personally, I don't use any of this, neither the Google Drive or any alternatives. Other alternatives, you got Huawei Cloud, Xiaomi Cloud, Tencent Cloud, Alibaba Cloud, but also Western options like Dropbox and OneDrive, which should work without the GMS. Push notifications. This probably is might be the biggest kick. Without FCM, I think it depends on the device you would be aiming at. For Huawei and for Xiaomi, it's not going to be a problem because they already have their own push notifications systems into the core, into their ecosystem. So losing FCM is not going to be such a big kick, but for devices that do not have a push notification system created yet, it may be problematic. It depends, because at that point it depends on it depends a lot on the developer of the app, whether they decided to also make their app work with other options like Umeng, JPush or OneSignal, right? A voice assistant, without Google Assistant, you would still have access to other options if you care about that. Search and web services, of course, no Google, no Chrome. So other options will be Baidu, Sogou, and so on. QQ browser. I have used a few of them. You can also use the Aurora store to get Firefox and use Firefox on your device in China and use Baidu in Firefox. I have used Baidu. I have had some use of the QQ browser. Honestly, this I don't think is very much a big kick, not having the Google search, not having Chrome. Specifically because I discourage anyone to use it. Firefox is just better. For payments, not having Google Pay is not at all problematic, since in China you can just pay with WeChat Pay or Alipay anywhere, and that includes both stores, sending money to friends, or even at literally at flea markets. You can still use this. You do not need Google Pay. Alipay can be set up easily by foreigners. WeChat Pay with like more problems, but it's still possible in theory. So Huawei has already developed a full alternative to the GMS called the HMS, Huawei Mobile Services, which include an app store. Apps for core apps will be Maps, Search, Assistant, Cloud, PushKit for notifications, Location, Analytics, and so on. And it's used on all newer Huawei devices since 2020. It's not surprising, since Huawei is very much a popular brand. In the summary of this, pretty much every feature of the GMS can find an alternative to use in China, whether it be the Play Store being replaced by Xiaomi's App Gallery, or the Aurora Store would be Google login. You can log in with Alipay if you want. Maps having AMAP, FCM, which I guess might be the bit problematic one. Google Drive, Google Assistant, Google Search, all of it can be easily replaced with alternatives that will work in China. So you do not need to worry about any of this.
I think I've talked about all of the topics that I wanted to. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's a very much a different style video than usually. When I edit and release this video, I'll already be back home in Europe, probably contemplating my life choices, maybe preparing for something big in the future, who knows. But I hope you liked this video. I'm glad you decided to spend your time watching this video. Leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for maybe not for videos like this, because I'll probably not be making many videos in this style, but if you want to subscribe you can. Share this video with your friends if your friends still believe in anti-Chinese, anti-communist, anti-socialist propaganda that is put out by the Western state media. And I hope to see you again next week in a rather regular, normal video. Bye bye.